There's no conference that needs this season to go well for its reputation more than the SEC.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. I'll give you three, not the only three, but three huge non-conference games that will define the 2025 season. And am I crazy with my ACC power rankings that I laid out last week on the show? Kenton Gibbs of Locked On ACC will tell me if so on the show today, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, the SEC has more on the line this year than any other conference. The Big Ten has won consecutive national championship games. No one expects the Big 12 to even make the national championship game. Heck, last year was a great success, and the Big 12 didn't win, technically, a playoff game. Arizona State got a bye by default and wouldn't have got one had we had the seeding rules that we're going to have this year in college football. The SEC, for the last 2 years, has missed the national championship game. Not just failed to win it. They haven't played in the national championship game. Two different playoff formats, same outcome. The last time that happened was 2004 and 2005. It's been 2 decades since the SEC missed 2 straight national championship games. And back in the late 90s, there was a stretch where they missed a few of them in a row. But that was before we talked about the SEC as being the most dominant conference of college football. That's before it was the most dominant conference in college football, with the best dynasty the sport has ever seen, with prolonged runs of dominant national champions. Teams like 2019 LSU, 2020 Bama, some of the early, when Bama beat Notre Dame in the national championship game years ago, it wasn't close. I mean, there have just been a lot of examples, and we've been moving away from that. And I've talked about this repeatedly here on the show. But this, to me, whenever someone comes up to me or has me on their show and says, what's the biggest story in college football going into this year? I go straight to what happens to the psyche of college football fans, media members, players, coach, everybody, if the SEC misses the title game for a 3rd straight year. There are plenty of options available. The SEC had several teams in the playoff last year. Last I checked, Georgia's a pretty worthy champion. Texas was a really good team. Tennessee was good, but obviously had some limitations. Their defense was elite, but Nico and the offense weren't where they needed to be. They ran into Ohio State. They got destroyed. Not necessarily the most shameful thing. That happened to the number 1 team in all of college football last year as well when the regular season came to a close. But the situation remains the same. The SEC couldn't make the national championship game. And with all the changes that have taken place in this sport, particularly NIL and the portal, I continue to believe the transfer portal does a better job to spread out the talent in college football than NIL does. I do think NIL helps because when every conference is able to go out there and pay players, and when every conference is able to do it openly, and when there's somewhat of a system and schools can actually in good conscience raise the money. I don't begrudge SEC teams that paid players under the table back in the day. I really don't. It was a ridiculous rule, and it paid off. It obviously paid off, but guess what? Now everybody seems to be doing it, and there's a lot more equity in college football in that regard. It's not just one conference is doing this, and they're doing it bigger and better than everybody else. No, this is something everyone's able to have access to, but the portal's the big thing. And a great example is actually in the SEC with Diego Pavia. Pre-transfer portal era, Vanderbilt has not beaten Alabama. Even with the coaching change, Vanderbilt doesn't beat Alabama. How did Diego Pavia get there? He went from a JUCO to New Mexico State to Vanderbilt. And he's back at Vanderbilt this year as one of the sneaky best quarterbacks in the SEC, or at least one of the most reliable quarterbacks in the SEC, because we have a lot of I don't know about Jackson Arnold at Auburn. I don't fully know about DJ Lagway at Florida. I like those guys. I haven't seen them play well for a whole season. I know what Diego Pavia can do. So it's interesting in that regard. But if the SEC, for the first time since the late 90s, misses the title game for a third straight year, it will solidify what I think a lot of people have been pointing out, have been waiting for, and yes, some have been seeking confirmation bias on. They've wanted the SEC to get knocked down. They've wanted the SEC to be torn down. The SEC was always overrated. The SEC, right? You hear those folks. You come across them. It's not just fans. You see plenty of media people and pundits that, that gripe about SEC bias and whatnot. And I've always said that SEC bias was true. It was also very warranted. However, the idea that they should only have to play 8 conference games, that we should automatically view them as being better just because they won games with an SEC schedule, that we should give them benefit of the doubt in preseason rankings just because they're the SEC, you will get the biggest data point to date if the SEC misses the title game for a third straight year. Heck, 2 years in a row is significant enough. I mean, the SEC champion last year, Georgia, got pushed around by Notre Dame. Notre Dame wasn't slinging it all over the yard. They could barely complete forward passes consistently. But guess what? They could run the ball. And they beat Georgia up front on both sides. And that's something that back in the peak of the SEC's run of dominance in this wonderful sport, that never happened. Because what used to happen is whoever the SEC champion was, more often than not, was just better than everybody else. Well, guess what? They're not. Are they really good? Of course they are. I'm not sitting here saying the SEC isn't one of the 2 best conferences in college football, or that, heck, arguably, they aren't the best. But to say that we should view them in the same light we used to continues to be less and less true. Now, the good news for the SEC, to try and capture the reputation that it once had as the clearly dominant conference in college football, they've got plenty of options that can go win a national championship. Because, frankly, I think in the national championship discussion, Alabama is getting overlooked somehow. Julian Sayin doesn't have to be great for Alabama to be national championship caliber. I think Kalen DeBoer was trying to get his feet wet a little bit with the Crimson Tide and adjusting to the SEC and all the new stuff that happens when you take a new job. His first year at Washington, they lost to a 3-9 Arizona State team. You can't explain that. Would that have happened in his second year? No. You know how I know that? Because they almost lost to a bad Arizona State team. But they didn't. Year 1, year 2. There was a home and road split there in his favor as well. But I don't suspect Alabama's going to have a Vanderbilt-style loss this year or go out and have a 3-point effort. Yes, 7 points were wrongly taken off the board against Oklahoma. Those sorts of things I don't expect to happen because I believe Kalen DeBoer is one of the 5 best coaches in college football. And don't forget, Alabama's got Ryan Grubb as their offensive coordinator because he went to the NFL for a year with my Seahawks. They decided to go in a different direction. I thought he was pretty good, but he's back with Kalen DeBoer now, and sometimes that's the difference that's needed. So I think Alabama gets overlooked in that discussion sometimes because they were 9-4 last year, and that's not normal, but they could win it all. Georgia could win it all. Texas could win it all. Texas winning the national championship with Arch Manning, we as a college football fan base, our minds are not ready for that level of hype and potentially cringe as well if that comes to fruition. So LSU's got big expectations. I don't think they can win the national championship. I think they can be good. I think they can get to the playoff. I'm going to talk about them later on today's show. So that's the good news for the SEC. But that also kind of makes my point at why this season is so big for the conference. I don't feel like they're down. I don't feel like they're out. They haven't stopped recruiting. They haven't failed to acquire talent. The money didn't dry up and they can't pay coaches. No, the opportunity is right there for the rest of college football to prove once and for all, yeah, SEC, you're not just better than everybody anymore. I think they've already proven something. But if there is another season without an SEC team in the championship game, oh boy. Oh boy, that will be a paradigm shifter. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below and hit me up on Twitter. I'm a huge fan of big, high-profile non-conference games. I think most of us are. I've got 3 you need to keep your eye on this year. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel's the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburn at the beach. And if you want to bet college football, you can do that. Everything you could possibly want is there and available to be wagered upon. You have got prop bets available, win totals, conference title odds, national title odds, individual games, which are less than 2 months away from being played, are all over there at FanDuel.com. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Inject quality non-conference games straight into my veins, because I tell you what, one of the reasons I have long opposed and continue to oppose playoff expansion is that you will minimize the importance of these high-profile games. So here are three that, with the season less than 2 months of the way, you have to have your eye on in the first few weeks of the year. Number one, this is not in any particular order. And again, these are not all of them. These are just three that you need to think about. Like, oh yeah, this is that game Spencer talked about, and it's really important. Okay, Notre Dame at Miami. This game is squarely putting the pressure on Mario Cristobal's shoulders. Marcus Freeman has got a lot of equity with his fan base right now, and he should. Dude was just in the national championship game in his, third season as head coach, and Notre Dame hadn't made the title game in quite a long time, over a decade, as a matter of fact. And he put on a coaching clinic for those several weeks where they beat Indiana, where they beat Georgia, where they beat Penn State, and they came back and made it close against Ohio State. So that was a marvelous job, and for a lot of reasons, Marcus Freeman is in the good graces of his fan base. Miami, on the other hand, you're looking at Mario Cristobal saying, okay, we've gotten better each year you've been here, from 5-7 to 7-5 to 10-2. When does the jump arrive? When do the recruiting classes pay off? They have pulled a top 10 class in 3 of the last 4 cycles. They are a school that should rightfully expect to make the playoff. They were 1 game away from doing it last year. All they had to do was beat Syracuse. They had a lead, and they couldn't do it. You came up a little short. Okay, it was still a successful, progressive season. But Notre Dame is coming to Miami. You've got the veteran quarterback. You're at home. You both have playoff aspirations. You got to win that football game. Got to win that football game for Mario Cristobal. So that's one. Second one that everyone's pretty aware of, Texas at Ohio State, rematch of the semifinal. This is in Columbus. So in that sense, advantage Ohio State. However, everything else kind of lines up with Texas. They bring back, except for the offensive line, they bring back more of their team from last year. Their quarterback has started more games than whoever Ohio State's quarterback is going to be. Is he going to be Julian Sayin? Probably, maybe. We don't really know. We don't really know. We'll find out. Arch Manning is not exactly the Drew Aller of starting quarterbacks, nor is he someone who we know nothing about and have never seen start a football game. I mean, if Julian Sayin winds up being Ohio State starter this year, we'll be seeing him for the first time. We've seen Arch Manning play. I've seen him start. I've seen him win games. He's been in the same system for several years. He's as prepared for this situation as anybody in the country. But the game is at Columbus. And yes, Ryan Day has lost some big games in the horseshoe before. Michigan this past year, Michigan 2 years ago, Oregon in 2021. So it's not a place that I look at and go, well, you can't go in and win just because it's Ohio State. The Buckeyes are replacing a lot. Texas is replacing a pretty good amount, but I don't think quite as much. I think that's going to be really, really fun. And that game has the ability, because of how high caliber it is, to define whether or not a team maybe gets a bye in the college football playoff or gets a better seed, or maybe even, and this is how it used to be all the time, used to define whether they got into the playoff. But Steve Sarkisian, famously 2 years ago took Texas on the road, beat Alabama. I suspect he might do the same thing there to Ohio State. But again, pressure, not a big storyline there, I don't think, for either head coach, because Steve Sarkisian, only head coach in the country to be in the semifinal each of the last 2 years. Ryan Day just won a national championship. They got plenty of equity there. Let me throw this one at you. And there is not a lot of equity on one sideline, and enough but a dwindling amount in the other. I'll let you decide which it applies to. LSU at Clemson, man. Brian Kelly has to win that football game. He has to. Here's the thing. I'm not officially making my pick. I'm just telling you I don't think he will. Clemson is really good. Reigning ACC champs, returning quarterback for a third straight year with the same offensive coordinator. They bring down Tom Allen from Penn State, who just coordinated a defense that went to the national semifinal. I know he's good. Dabo Swinney can still coach. They return a bunch of their production from last year. I like Clemson a lot. Now, LSU's got the highest rated transfer portal class in the country. They have Garrett Nussmeier, who might be my favorite quarterback in the country coming into this year. He's certainly one of them. I'm a huge Garrett Nussmeier fan. This game's just going to be awesome. And does Dabo Swinney need to win? No. Would he really, really like to? Of course he would. Brian Kelly needs to win. Brian Kelly needs to stop losing the first week of the year. Brian Kelly needs to remind his fan base that he can beat high-level programs. I don't know where their faith in his ability to do that would be right now. I can't imagine the confidence level would be very high in Baton Rouge. If this season doesn't go well for Brian Kelly, it is hot seat talk going into 2026. The buyout is too big for this year. Barring a truly Florida State-esque level collapse, that's not going to happen. But man, Brian Kelly's got to win that game, and I don't think he's going to. I think he'll start 0-1 again and try and scrap LSU back into the playoffs. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. Am I crazy with my ACC power rankings? Someone's going to come here and tell me whether or not I am. Am I crazy? Am I not crazy? That's what Kenton Gibbs is here to decide. He's the co-host of Locked On ACC, so he'll tell me whether or not my ACC power rankings are out of whack. So Kenton has no idea where I've ranked anyone. He's going to be shocked when I put Clemson dead last, and he's going to go ballistic, of course. But let's go like this, Kenton. I'll list every team, 17 of them to be exact, in order, and then right afterwards, you will say the 2 or 3 biggest things that stand out. Are you ready?
Let's do it. And by the way, I'm not above snitching to David Locke. Okay, if Clemson is dead last, I will push for legislation to start drug testing Locked On.
Okay. Clemson is first, followed by Miami, Louisville, Georgia Tech is fourth, SMU, Duke, Pitt. Nope, I forgot. I swapped those. Oh, no, I swapped them correctly. Yeah, SMU, Duke, Pitt, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Cal, NC State, Boston College, Virginia, Florida State, North Carolina, Wake Forest, and Stanford bringing up the rear. And I swapped Syracuse and Pitt. That's who I forgot to do a little flip-flop of there. So I'll make that note in my notes. What stands out about those rankings to you, Ken? He's got a face. Here we go.
What's got you so high on Cal?
On Cal? What do you mean so high? Cal's like 11th on this list.
I don't think you understand how much turnover Cal is dealing with from last year's team. Their starting quarterback. Do you know where he is now?
He's at Indiana, Fernando Mendoza. Yeah, he left. Yep. Well, they got a new offensive coordinator. They're gonna have a new quarterback.
Jaden Ott, pretty good running back. Where's he
pretty good.
At from last year?
He's at Oklahoma.
Well, they had a running back that actually rushed for more yards than Jaden Ott last year because he dealt with a little bit of injury. Is he still at Cal? Did Cal
he's not.
Any of the top 4 rushers?
No, they brought some guys in the portal. They're solid.
Here's the thing. I love Kendrick Raphael. I really do. Former NC State guy. I broke down this film. I could break down this film right now and tell you his patience as a runner, his contact balance is unique. It is not something that you see every day. I don't see how you have a new quarterback, a basically brand new wide receiver core, a defense that has been decimated by guys either leaving in the draft or graduating out, and you believe that this team is going to be middle of the pack? I'm sorry.
I've got him 10th.
10th out of 17 is about the bottom of the middle of the pack.
It is, yeah, bottom middle of that's where Cal always is, the bottom middle of the pack. Justin Wilcox finds a way.
And here's the thing, right? I'm not even trying to be a homer right now. NC State behind them is one of the most insane things I could ever think of. Okay. And And I know people are going to look at me and say, Ken, that team's going to have to put up 40 a game to win ball games. I don't disagree. Other than Sean Brown, not a ton to be very optimistic about defensively in terms of proven product. I get that. CJ Bailey would be better than anybody on the field in a Cal-NC State matchup this year. And that doesn't even mention Hollywood Smothers, who I think is a better player than him. And that doesn't even mention Justin Jolie, who I think is the best player in terms of skill position there. That doesn't even mention Jacarius Peak, who is a guy that I think is going to make himself some big money this year, because last year, quiet as kept on an offensive line that saw Anthony Belton get drafted. I think Jacarius Peak was the best performer all year long. So I think that that's another one that has me quite interested. And I will say this, one thing that I did like about that list that many people may disagree with, I like where you have SMU. I like that one. I like that, because a lot of people are saying like, oh, SMU, if you have them outside your top 3, you're insane. You're insane to have that. Let me tell you something. SMU lost a lot. I'm sorry, but I'm very cautious of teams who lose a lot. The only redeeming factor why I don't really push very hard against people who have SMU in their top 5 is because they return one of the most electric quarterbacks in the country in Kevin Jennings. He can do it on the ground. He can do it with his arm. And his decision-making, I'm expecting to take a step forward. That is the only reason that I'm like, you know what? I could see this team being better than the 5th best team. But again, I'm not sure if right now, if Kevin Jennings is a guy that you win because of and not a guy that you win with. He has the ability to show that in spades this year. And if he is a guy you win because of, there'll be a top 3 team in this league. So, you know, I don't think that your rankings were too out of there. You know, I actually think that that's some ball knowledge by Spencer McLaughlin. I really do.
Hear that? Hear that? YouTube comments. Kenton says I'm a ball knower.
Hey, listen.
Ball knower.
I'm not saying you need to change your Twitter name to Spencer McLaughlin, knower of ball, but maybe. But in all seriousness, I think that that's one of the better lists that I've seen for the ACC. I think a lot of national pundits get a lot of things wrong. Another thing that I think you had right, UNC near the bottom. I know.
Thank you.
Everybody's going to say it's because he's an NC State guy and all that good stuff. Listen, I'm trying to tell you all, I don't see a word. Was Gio Lopez the best quarterback in his conference last year?
No, but he was good.
He was good, but he was not the best quarterback in this conference last year. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah. I'd have to brush up on my Sun Belt quarterback play, but I don't think he was the best guy in the league. No.
So you're not the best quarterback in a group of 5, and we're expecting you to step up to the Power 5 without much talent at receiver, and we're just expecting, everything's just going to work out here. And
with a head coach, by the way, who's never done the college football thing before.
And I was just about to say, congratulations, if you're listening to this podcast, you have coached as many college football games as Bill Belichick. And by college football games, I mean in any capacity. You have coached as many games as a coordinator, as an assistant. You have coached as many or more, because I know some college coaches do listen to this show. So you've either coached as many or more than him. And the biggest question mark here, I really like Bo Atkinson a lot as a he was a makeup on that defense. He really was. He's was gone. A big concealer. Now. He's in Columbus now. So bye-bye. You know, you're sitting here saying to yourself, where are the stars on this defense? Who are the guys that are going to make something happen? And that's
Kamari House, the Washington transfer at linebacker, he can be a star.
Can be.
As a freshman last year, he was a stud.
Here's the thing. I don't disagree. I think Kamari House has a very good career ahead of him. I am worried about the fact that if in situations like this, I tell people all the time, a special defender is so easy for an offense to hide or avoid, because you could say, no, wait a minute. They don't got no ball players around them. Hey, do not double this nose guard. Don't touch him. Climb to the linebacker immediately. When we snap the ball, I want you in House's lap immediately. I want you violating House like this is Dr. House and you took away his pills in 04. If you know, you know. But in all seriousness, that's one of those things where I look at this team from top to bottom, and it's not just their quarterback. What's going on with that situation? You could say Gio Lopez is the guy, but you've got multiple players that believe, at least, that they're going to push for that position. The dynamic playmakers on the outside, what do you have there? An offensive line that wasn't all that great last year lost pieces. And you know, who did they bring in that you would say this is a quality Power 4 starter?
Yeah.
I just don't see it.
You want to know what my favorite part about this list is? That I almost went super bold, but I like Miller Moss and I like Jeff Brom, so I wasn't going to put Louisville lower than 3. Mm-hmm. Georgia Tech at 4 is my favorite team on, like, that's my favorite placement on this particular list. You realize the games, it's unfortunate the Georgia game isn't going to be played on campus, which I think is ridiculous because they had to play on Georgia's campus a year ago, but all right, whatever. Georgia has home games, well, one home, one neutral, against Clemson and Georgia this year. They took Georgia to, what was it, 8 overtimes?
8 overtimes. Yeah.
8 overtimes last year. Clemson travels to Atlanta Saturday, September 13th. Conference championship implications right then and there. Your quick take on the Yellow Jackets, Kenton, because I like Brent Key. I like Haynes King. I like continuity. I don't love that they lost Eric Singleton Jr. to Auburn, but man, they're about running the ball anyway.
Their top-end talent can compete with anybody. Their top-end talent, they're one of the best in the conference. What is separating them from those top 3 teams, I would say, is the depth aspect of this thing. With all due respect to the guys at Georgia Tech, he has done a hell of a job recruiting there. He has done a good job to land 4-star guys out of Georgia when the University of Georgia is doing what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
Cinema. Absolute cinema. Great job. But with that being said, I am a little bit concerned because this team reminds me of where NC State was last year. The top end talent is there. Now, hear me out. I don't
like that.
Hold on, Spencer. Hold on. Stay with. See,
all right, I'm here.
So hear me out. Last year I said NC State is going to be really good, except there are a couple of key positions where they cannot afford an injury or things will get catastrophic. And they had injuries at virtually all of those positions. I'm not saying that Georgia Tech will be that snake bitten. It literally took NC State's starting quarterback getting hurt, their starting Mike linebacker getting hurt to kind of make things unravel. And to most people, they would say your Mike linebacker and your quarterback, 2 most important positions in football, many people would argue. So I'm not saying, hey, Georgia Tech is going to have that exact same bug or anything like that. I'm worried that they could be there. I'm worried that with 1 or 2 injuries at some pivotal spots, all of a sudden you're looking at Georgia Tech saying, hey, can they get a stop? Hey, what's going on offensively? Like, can teams just load the box up with one more than they can block all the time, and is that it? It's kind of an interesting thing in that way. And I'll tell you, I love the kid from FIU that they got to replace Singleton. I think that he's a stud.
Rivers,
Rivers. He's a burner.
Rivers could be a gamer.
He could be in that potential exact same kind of role that Singleton was in last year. Again, top end talent, I think, can go with anybody. When you get past that top end talent, you're stuck scratching your head a little bit. And Georgia Tech fans know how much I love them. You know, I've had to apologize publicly for not talking about them enough because of how highly I think of them. But in all seriousness, that is a team that I look at and I kind of say, if health abides, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they have to be completely injury-free because there are some positions, offensive line in particular, they got studs. They got dudes everywhere, which is going to put you in a good position.
And they're going to run smash-mouth football right at your face, whether you like it or not.
Exactly. They can afford an injury or 2 on the offensive line, and they'll be okay. But it's some of the other positions that I look at. I'm like, you're 1 injury away from all of a sudden every receiver that looks at y'all sees lamb chops, baked beans, oxtails, good greens, mac and cheese, the gravy on the side. You know, it's a tough time.
Kenton's got me hungry, and I've got chicken, potatoes, and corn waiting in the fridge. I can't wait. Kenton Gibbs, who definitively declared on this show that I'm not crazy. So that's really a win. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.